Hello. Today, I want to talk about the subject of feelings and emotions and why some of us are really afraid to get into our feelings and emotions. The first question I'd like to explore is, what are feelings and emotions? So emotions and feelings are basically feedback mechanisms, or you may say biofeedback mechanisms, for us to understand what is happening in the deeper realms of our mind. Our mind is constantly in a mode of giving us information in order to protect us, or it's processing information in order to give us feedback on the sensory perceptions that we've had. The process at a high level is pretty simple. You have an external stimuli, for example, something you look at through your eyes or something you touch or feel. And then that gives you a sensory perception of your external environment, which gets interpreted in your brain and then sent back to you in the form of information. Now, what happens is, because the unconscious or subconscious mind is meant to protect us, it will give us a lot of false positives in many situations. It's like sometimes we go in to get a flu test, and we get tested, and it's a false positive because we don't have any symptoms of a flu, but somehow it turned out to be a positive. Our unconscious or subconscious mind functions in the very same way. So it really is in the prefrontal cortex of our brain that we can interpret information in a more conscious way. This is the full front of our brain, the frontal part of our brain. So this is why in many of my videos, I have talked about why it's important to bring all of the information to our prefrontal cortex, which is objective, unbiased, and rational in helping us find solutions to or find resolutions to our problems. Now, one of the reasons we are so terrified about getting into our feeling and emotional body is because of the fact that in the past, in our childhood experiences especially, we have been rejected for having certain types of feelings and emotions. If our caregivers were not particularly attuned or emotionally intelligent and sensitive to recognize that our feelings and sensations are just a gateway for us to understand the fears that we may be experiencing in our brains and in our minds, then they essentially gave you a version of how they had interpreted their own feelings and emotions, or they had learned how to understand behaviors from their parents and their caregivers and transmitted that along to you without applying any logical processing around it, without applying their own thinking behind it. So what ended up happening is that you ended up absorbing cultural patterns, family traditions, societal values, all as a hand-me-down through the generations without a conscious thinking applied into it. Now, when you are a child and going through your childhood, you might have had an experience where you wanted to express a certain emotion or feeling to your parents, and you took the step of doing that in your homes. Now, your parent might have immediately cut you off or not worked with you to process this in an emotionally intelligent way, in an emotionally mature way, because they lacked the skills to do that effectively with you. However, what happens in this process is you learn to shut yourself down emotionally. And over a period of time, you build a shell around your emotional world by hardening your heart, by not allowing yourself to feel the things you do, even when you feel them, by rejecting how you feel them, and pressing on with your life as if nothing happened. Over a period of time, this becomes a learned habit. Now, the good news is because it's a learned habit, you can also unlearn it. And the bad news is that because it's a learned habit that has stayed with you for so long, it's not so easy to unravel it. There are many patterns that have gotten accumulated on top of patterns, and now you're in a place of confusion as opposed to clarity. Now, how does it all tie into feelings and emotions? So first of all, what happens is when we start to shut down our feelings and emotions, over a period of time, we get desensitized to our feelings, which is what shows up as the avoidant attachment pattern in a lot of relationships, or we get oversensitized to our feelings and emotions, which is what shows up as anxiously attached pattern in a relationship. I've done a lot of research on both of these topics, and I will go into them in a future session in more in-depth coverage. But for today's purposes, it suffices to know that both responses of the anxious and the avoidant come from the same basis or foundation of how emotions were handled by caregivers. In one situation, which is the avoidant, there was a perception on the part of the person or the child that felt or received these behaviors or patterns from its caregivers, that expressing feelings and emotions can be particularly challenging and should not be done. And therefore, the avoidant learned to run away from the emotions and feelings. The anxious, on the other hand, took a slightly different approach. This person instead said, what is it about me that is causing my caregivers and my parents to respond to me in this manner? But as you can see, there are two different reactions to this same response from our caregivers of not being emotionally attuned to our needs and to us as emotional beings. So then over a period of time, we learn to develop a wall around our emotional feelings. Even the avoidant has an area where there's no walls, but they're afraid to let in the person into their world because they're afraid of being hurt. And in the case of the anxious, there is a part of them that actually wants to run away from their own feelings. So the aspect of avoidant exists in the anxious, and the aspect of anxious actually exists in the avoidant as well. Now, because of this, over a period of time, what we learn to do is to put up walls around ourselves, whether it's in the form of a wall which says, I will not let you into my emotions, or it's more of a sense of, I need to guard and protect myself because I am so sensitive, which is more of the anxious situation. Now, in both of these cases, walls get built up, fear starts to rise. And as fear rises, what also happens is we shut down our capacity to love in those instances. So over a period of time, we get desensitized to our emotional bodies, or we get oversensitized into our emotional bodies. And part of consciousness is for us to actually stand in the middle of these two spaces and look at the context of our experiences and to actually respond rather than react to our experience and to our external circumstances. So, in order to do this, though, we must have a fundamental shift in belief. Otherwise, the human mind is not going to allow us to go there. So what is this fundamental shift in belief that we must have in order to drop our resistance to getting into our emotions and feelings in a way that is actually supportive and allows us to grow? Well, the belief that we must have is that we are worthy of love. Because when we are trapped in the tentacles of fear, our mind is telling us that we are not worthy of love. So the belief shift we must have is in fact that we deserve to be loved. And so when we step into this idea of our deservedness to be loved, we can start to shift some of our older patterns and behaviors and habits which have kept us trapped in our fear and instead open our hearts to love. Now, that alone is not enough. We also must consciously get into all aspects of us when we have blocked off the love and recognize where fear has been running us. One of the ways to do this is to actually get into our own mindset and find out how our fear of rejection has actually served us. Because in the past, when our emotions were rejected, we absorbed that we were rejectable. And therefore, we took whatever it is that we felt in the form of rejection and started to identify with our own rejection at a very, very deep level instead of our capacity or our ability to attract love, or our deservedness, you may say, to attract love at the deepest aspects or to the deepest aspects of our being. So what we must do is we must look at our fear of rejection and see with clarity how our fear of rejection has actually been serving us. How did we use our fear of rejection to our advantage? I know what you're going to say. From all the clients that I've worked with, I will tell you, and even my own work, I should say, I know exactly what you're going to tell me, which is, I am not capable of seeing that. Okay? And what I am going to tell you is that you are. In fact, it does benefit you, and in fact, you are capable of seeing that. So we must look at our fear, looking past our resistance to dropping the fear, and identify with certainty how our fear of rejection has been serving us. And when we can do this in an unbiased way by asking ourselves questions, quality questions, in fact, high quality questions, that will reveal to us the deeper truth that we also hold within us. And I guarantee you that you hold it within you. I've done this long enough to tell you that you hold it within you. Then you can start to peel back the layers of fear that have been running the show, the layers of rejection that have been running the show, and start to uncover and discover the depths to which you actually also deserve to be loved. And then you can do this with conscious attention, dedication, loyalty, and intention into your life. You can start to open your heart at a level that you have not done before. I don't care whether you're a man or a woman. You have it in you to see the truth of your existence, to see the true reality of your existence if you applied your mind and your heart to it. And so if you take the steps that I'm recommending that you take in this video to unravel the fear of rejection, I promise you, you will start to see the truth of who you are in your heart center. This is how you start to live a life that you love and to also attract the relationships where you feel love in an unconditional way, where you feel accepted in an unconditional way. Because you came here to love others and to also be loved by others. You came here to accept others And you also came here to be accepted by others. And the tricky part in the universe is that until you embody that sense of being loved and accepted, you don't have to completely love and accept yourself, but you have to have a belief change that you do deserve to be loved and accepted. Then you can start to shift the reality of your existence and your external circumstances to one of love. So I encourage you today to listen to this video perhaps a couple of times and really soak in the depth of what I'm telling you here. Because it's exactly the same teaching that I actually share with many of my private clients. We go deeper, of course, than what I'm sharing over here. But what I'm sharing with you is a big portion of how I guide my private and my group clients. And I'm giving you something that will change your life forever. So I really encourage you to look at your past relationships, to look at your fears of rejections in your past relationships, and to start owning that truth of those situations within your heart. Have a good day.